Here are my FPL Game Week 5 transfer plans. It's safe to say Game Week 4 was a little bit of a disaster for FPL managers out there, with the likes of Alexander Isak and João Pedro injured, blanks for the likes of Mo Salah. It was a tough week, and we need to talk about how we are going to get back on track going into Game Week 5. So as always, if you look forward to today's video, make sure you do drop a like, aiming for 400 on this video. And of course, if you're not already, make sure you do smash that subscribe button for daily fantasy content. Enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So first up, as always, we need to take a look back at the game week that is just gone, and it was a red arrow for the team. The dream of continuous green arrows is over. You can see here my overall rank being 1.7 million. Prior going into Game Week 4, I was around 1 million rank. So it's a pretty decent red arrow, to say the least. And when we look at this team, it kind of makes sense why. So just to remind people, I ended up doing one free transfer in the end going into Game Week 4. I ended up selling Saliba to bring in Andy Robertson. My logic was that I was going to sell somebody in Saliba who was inevitably going to concede for someone like Robertson, who was a guaranteed clean sheet. As you can see, that didn't go too well at all. So I went for that move. Kind of glad I didn't go for the -4, which was originally on the cards, of doing Saka to Mo Salah and then downgrading Alexander Isak to João Pedro. But let's be real, both moves didn't really pay off in the end. So 45 points in total. I thought this was going to be the week for a Henderson clean sheet, and nonetheless, Palace still find a way to concede a 1-pointer there. A backline of 1-pointer for Robertson, 1-pointer for Trent, and a 2-pointer for Robinson. That one particularly hurt with a last-minute winner for West Ham. I'm still really happy with Robinson as a pick, to be honest with you. I still think he has been a great option and value at 4.5 million. Now, in terms of the midfielders, I mean, Bukayo Saka kind of saving the day with a 7-pointer against Spurs and thankfully wiping out that Pedro Porro clean sheet. But the rest are just atrocious. Rodgers again with his customary 2-pointer, Diogo Jota with the 1-pointer, and Eze with a 2-pointer. I really fancied him this week against the Leicester team, who are conceding goals for fun right now. And finally up front, Erling Haaland, it's safe to say, has been the hero every single game week for the team, and that has continued with a 13-pointer. But of course, captaincy on him, 26 points. Honestly, was needed this week just to save me. In terms of the other two, a surprise benching for Muniz, but of course that is now an issue with his counterpart Raul Jimenez getting the goal. That screams rotation going forward for Muniz, so that is going to be a concern for the team. And the other big one is going to be Alexander Isak. I really fancied him going into this game week and the following game week. But unfortunately, going off at halftime with what we think is an injury, we don't really know the extent of it right now. That was just the icing on the cake on the final game of Game Week 4. So, of course, we have issues with this team. Do we wildcard? Do we use free transfers? Do we roll the transfer? We need to discuss exactly that. But 45 points, a big old red arrow, and lots to ponder. So take a look at my current Game Week 5 team. You can see it here. One free transfer, 1 million in the bank. And the big thing first and foremost at the start of the season is we need to ask ourselves, does this team require a wildcard? Going into Game Week 4, I decided that it wasn't needed. And obviously coming into Game Week 5, I didn't really have a plan in place to use my wildcard. Main reason being is Man City versus Arsenal, not a nice fixture to come into an entry point. Not really any fixture swings for certain teams at this point. Whereas when we look at Game Week 6 and 7, that feels very much like a case of if you are going to wildcard, it is going to be around that territory then. So even though my team is in a bit of problems right now, as you can see, Isak on the bench because we don't really know the situation on him. Muniz on the bench because he's a massive rotation risk. So I'm having to play people like Lewis Hall, who him in himself is a rotation risk. We've got teams playing up against one another. Fulham against Newcastle. We got obviously Haaland up against Bukayo Saka. Not a great position to be in. Even the likes of Eze and Henderson with tough games at home against Man United, who maybe are slowly turning a corner under Ten Hag. Maybe we'll see. So even though the team is in trouble right now, I just think Game Week 5 is just not the right game week to be using my wildcard. I think I can get through this game week regardless of what the news is on Alexander Isak. And as well, it's worth noting for anybody that's made an early transfer, please, if you haven't already, don't make a transfer. We've got Champions League football coming this week, and anything can happen, from anything from an injury to certain rotation. If we see a Diogo Jota start and play 90 minutes midweek, That is then going to scream massive rotation going into the weekend with the likes of Darwin Núñez and Gakpo already taking minutes away from this Liverpool front three. So if you haven't made a transfer, please hold off. Do not do anything until that Friday press conference when we get updates from teams. Because even a team like Arsenal are playing on a Thursday in the Champions League, which is going to have a huge impact on their game against Man City. So yes, the team is in trouble right now, but I don't think it needs a wild card this week. Now, my team is going to completely depend on what the news is on Alexander Isak. If he's confirmed fit and it was only a minor thing, I know he had a nosebleed, but I don't really know the situation on it, then he comes straight into the team. Lewis Hall comes onto the bench and I play a 3-5-2 formation. And to be honest with you, with that team going into the week, I don't really think it screams out a transfer necessary. Yes, the team is struggling right now with certain players, but if I could roll a transfer in any particular game week and allow myself flexibility in game week 6, that is always going to be the right move. I knew Muniz is also an issue for the team, but he can easily sit on the bench rather than using one of those precious free transfers. So it's all going to come down to this Alexander Isak news. But I don't feel that fearful of playing this team. I think there are points and avenues to points for the likes of Liverpool double defence. But we're going to take a look at the fixtures in isolation for this week because, as you can see, I don't really know which teams that I don't have ownership in that I'm that scared of. Of course, the Man City Arsenal one is the big one that playing against one another. I don't want to be buying players from either of those teams. Brighton originally looked good against Forest on the Sunday, but Forest have proven to be a very tough team to score against. So I don't feel like investing in Brighton right now, even though the fixture's good, is really where I want to be using one of my free transfers. And when we just work down the fixtures now, West Ham versus Chelsea, again, not really a great entry point. Villa versus Wolves is the big one, but of course, Villa in the Champions League this week, no chance of going early doors on an Aston Villa player. And can we confidently sit here and say any player is going to get guaranteed game time in that fixture? Probably not, I'm going to be real with you. And outside of that, Leicester up against Everton. Again, we're going to talk about some Leicester forwards in a minute. Liverpool versus Bournemouth, but I'm already tripled up on Liverpool. Scary prospect going without Mo Salah, but I made my bed. I've got to sleep in it now with the situation. I think the big one is going to be Spurs up against Brentford. That feels like an opportunity maybe to jump on some Spurs assets and maybe get a reaction from them off the back of that disappointing North London derby. But Brentford themselves have proven to be a tough team to beat sometimes. And I don't think necessarily jumping on Spurs is absolutely the right move to do. So this is the team right now. Let's take a look at some potential transfers. But I almost feel content rolling this team out if I need to. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So if we do get some bad news regarding Alexander Isak and he does look like he's a doubt for the weekend, as I mentioned, I don't feel like my team is that bad, but I also feel like with the money invested in Alexander Isak and the fixture starting to turn bad for Newcastle at 8.5 million, it does feel like an opportunity to actually jump on some players for the longer term in my team. So I've brought up 4 different forward options available. All have completely different benefits, pros and cons to them. So we got Calvert-Lewin at Everton at 5.9, very much going to be the budget pick here. Then we got Solanke at 7.5 million, who has just returned from injury. Havertz at 8.1 million, and then Watkins at 8.9. So again, we need to take them into account right now. Going into game week 5 in isolation, that is going to impact both Havertz and Watkins because they both play in the Champions League. Solanke is going to be impacted going into game week 6 because that is when the Europa League comes into itself. DCL, as you can expect, has no European football to worry about. So firstly, take a look at the actual numbers for all of these players right now. We filtered it based on expected FPL points, and Watkins is leading the way at 28.64 and only actually got 22 FPL points. So even though he's only really had a good game week 4, it could have been so much better for him in the opening few game weeks. Now, if you cast your eye to the expected goals in the opening 4 games here, and you can see we need to take into account the games that certain players have played. So Solanke has played very few minutes. Calvert-Lewin has played decent minutes, but Watkins has actually played the least of the 3 that we're looking at the top here. But he's accumulated an XG of 3.73, which is ridiculous. Havertz second best at 1.94, then Calvert-Lewin at 1.32. Again, very difficult to come to any conclusions on Solanke because he's played so few minutes in a Spurs shirt and only just recently returned from injury. And again, when we look at the shot volume, because this is something that's really important to me when I'm looking at forwards, I need to see forwards that actually have shots all the time in the team. Watkins at 10, Havertz at 10, Then we got Calvert-Lewin at 6, which is not bad, but obviously nowhere near the level of these two here, who are also playing in much better teams, it is worth noting. Watkins getting all of those big chances as well. And expected assists, Watkins leading the way, which is super interesting. Now, when we take a look at the fixtures, the first thing we need to consider, of course, is what kind of time frame are we actually looking at bringing in a forward? Because let's take Kai Havertz as an example. Underlying numbers are great. We know his game time is going to be fantastic, I think, regardless. But game week 5 just doesn't feel like a great entry point for him. So even though I really like him as a long-term pick for game week 6 and game week 7, if you're planning on a wildcard in game week 6, then Havertz is completely off the picture because you just avoid him for game week 5, then you bring him in a game week 6 wildcard if you deem him essential. So for my team right now, I don't actually think I'm completely locked in on a game week 6 wildcard. As I mentioned, I think my team's actually okay set. I have a lot of the players that I already want to own, someone like a Bukayo Saka. So if I am forced to do the Alexander Isak move, I'm not completely ruling out a Kai Havertz move, even though game week 5 is a terrible week to buy him because it's almost a long-term planning move in preparation for game week 6 and 7. But I also agree it isn't ideal bringing in a player ahead of Man City away. Now, in terms of the rest of the fixtures here, let's just take a look at the cheapest to the most expensive. Calvert-Lewin right now having the best fixtures. Leicester away, followed by Palace and Newcastle at home. Ipswich away. Again, if we're looking at a 1 game week punt, I think it's actually okay, Calvert-Lewin, but would I pick him over Dominic Solanke at home to Brentford or Watkins at home to Wolves? Probably not. So I'd only feel compelled to go to Calvert-Lewin if I was maybe looking to change up the team in general. Now, of course, Calvert-Lewin could easily be a Muniz replacement if we do get Alexander Isak confirmed to be fit, and maybe for some reason I feel compelled to go to Calvert-Lewin. I think he's ticking over lovely right now in this Everton team, but do I feel that compelled to do Isak down to Calvert-Lewin? I think the answer is going to be no right now. I very much see Calvert-Lewin as a Muniz replacement if that situation arises for my team. So it comes down right now to Solanke versus Watkins again. We need to monitor the minutes of Watkins because John Duran's doing fantastic when he's coming in for Aston Villa. If Watkins plays 90 minutes midweek, could we maybe see some minutes managed in that home fixture against Wolves? Because if there wasn't Champions League, I think Watkins would absolutely come into my team. Even though the fixtures are mixed, I'm going to be honest, Wolves, Ipswich, United at home, Fulham, Bournemouth, I think they are brilliant long-term fixtures for any team. And I think Watkins is one of those players that I could equally hold long-term, but also bring in for a 1 game week punt if I wanted to. But let's be real, Watkins is going to be all about those Champions League minutes. And finally, Solanke. Now, a player that very difficult to come to any sort of conclusion. I thought he was quite poor in the North London derby, but I do expect him to continue to play in this Spurs team. It's just not that easy to bring in a player who hasn't completely gelled with the team right now and could at any point be on the chopping block if Ange thinks that Solanke is the problem rather than the team in general. So I love the idea of Solanke because I could bring him in and actually have him long term. And I think if he is going to break his goal scoring dry spell, then it could easily be against this Brentford team. But I think I need a little bit more confidence from Ange before investing in a Dominic Solanke. So right now, if my hand was forced, I actually think I'd be tempted to do the Kai Havertz move and just bring him in for the foreseeable future if I don't see myself wildcarding in game week 6. But again, if Watkins gets 60 minutes, 70 minutes in the Champions League, I think it makes only sense with the money in the bank to go to an Ollie Watkins, knowing that he could easily match Havertz over the same period. So as we discussed, Alexander Isak out is the likely transfer if we do get any news that he is going to be a massive doubt. And again, I need to see whether Newcastle fans think Lewis Hall played well enough to start once again away against Wolves. If there are any doubts in any of those situations, the transfer is absolutely going to be made. And it will be Isak or Muniz out for one of those forwards that we did discuss. Of course, Isak allows me to go to any of those premiums. Muniz is a bit more Calvert-Lewin in that department. Now, of course, the big problem with game week 5 with me not going for Mo Salah the previous week is going to be captaincy. Now, even though Erling Haaland is on absolute incredible form, do I feel confident putting the captaincy against one of the few defences that could lock down Erling Haaland? I'm going to say no. I think right now I've defaulted on him because I know the game time is going to be great. He's on penalties, and if anybody's going to score past the likes of Gabriel and Saliba, it is going to be Erling Haaland. But do I think it's the optimal captaincy right now? Absolutely not. And when we do look at some of the transfers that I'm looking to bring in, do I feel confident putting a captaincy on Kai Havertz? Absolutely not. Do I feel confident putting a captaincy on Dominic Solanke? No. But do I feel like a rogue captaincy on Ollie Watkins isn't out of the possibility? I think the answer there is possible. So I need to also remember that the player that I'm bringing in may also have to take the captaincy, because Diogo Jota's minutes, even though I'd love to put the captaincy on him, it's very hard to predict. Eze could be a rogue captain at home against Man United who still give up big chances. But outside of that, apart from a Liverpool defender picking up the captaincy, I think I really am struggling to see anybody viable outside of Erling Haaland. So I need to remember, if Isak's being sold, captaincy also needs to be a consideration for this game week. And do I think that player could outscore Erling Haaland? And maybe the only one out of those could be Ollie Watkins going into game week 5. And that maybe sways my decision of bringing Ollie Watkins in for the foreseeable future. But again, Champions League football does scare me a little bit. So just to conclude, because I appreciate it's a very tough one to answer right now, if Isak is confirmed fit, he will come in and I'll play 3-5-2 at the expense of Lewis Hall. But if Isak is ruled out, then I think I will be using the funds available in him to invest in either Havertz, Solanke or Watkins. And that is going to all come down to that Champions League game and whether there is going to be considerable minutes for the likes of Watkins and Havertz. Because that is the case, maybe Solanke is the wise move for my team. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Plenty of time to go between now and that game week 5 deadline. Yes, guys, that's going to wrap up today's Game Week 5 Transfer Plans video. I really hope it provided some value. As you can see on my team, still a lot of plans in place, but no real conclusions, because the Alexander Isak news will be really important in terms of what direction this team goes in. Let me know any questions in the comment section. Of course, let me know how you got on in Game Week 4. Was it a disaster like my own team? Make sure you do drop a like on the video, and of course, smash that subscribe button for daily fantasy content. Have an amazing day. Take care. We'll see you real soon. Cheers.